Hilary Russo is an award-winning television journalist, producer, and multimedia host. She is also a certified holistic health coach with the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, a certified havening techniques practitioner, and the host of the Hilistically Speaking podcast. We'll ask her about all of that and more on today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hilary Russo, welcome. It's so exciting to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Doug, it's always a pleasure to share space with you.
Oh, thanks so much. So you have, you're such a slacker. I bet you when you see guys in your high school reunion and stuff when are you going to do something with your life, Hilary? I mean, you're an award-winning television journalist, you're a producer, you've got your own podcast, you're a certified health coach, you're a havening techniques practitioner. I mean, what else? What do you do?
The struggle is real. I need to do something with my life. I know. My mother's very disappointed. It's been a journey. That's for sure. It's definitely a journey. And, when I've talked to people that look at, my resume of work, if that's what you want to call it, a lot of times people are like, oh, you've changed careers. I'm like, no, actually I haven't. I've added to, I'm still a journalist. Yeah. Right. And I'm focusing on health and wellness and bringing in different modalities and different approaches now that I have private practice. And to me, it's no different, because as a journalist, you are actively listening to those that you have conversations with for stories. And it's no different than having clients and they're sharing their stories. It's just that something's in a more intimate, private setting rather than sharing it with the masses and media.
Right. So tell me, how did you get started? Because you literally have been on television for 20 years or something like that, right?
Yeah, I've been in TV since I was in college. So a year or two?
Longer, but yeah.
Yeah, over 25 years I've been in this business as a journalist, as a TV anchor, news producer, reporter, correspondent, host, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I've done it all. I do it all. And I started doing that while I was in college. I worked I was an intern at the station near where I went to school in Dallas, Texas at SMU, go Ponies. And I interned there. And from there, kind of moved around, did different internships, and then just nailed my first morning news anchor and reporter job. So small market life back then before there was cable.
When I was looking at your website, thinking, okay, let's find out a little bit about this person. It's like, oh my God, you've been on, was it QVC or a host? Yeah.
I'm one of they have the regular program hosts that work for QVC that you see regularly. And then they have folks like me that they call the, guest experts or guest hosts, where we come in and we represent different products. So I've been doing that since I moved back to New York. I'm from New York originally. I moved away for college, moving around, working in television. And when I came back here, I'm like, I already worked for PBS kind of, as a travel correspondent for one of their shows, and I do all the pledge drives. And really, QVC is no different from doing a pledge drive, except the difference is with PBS, you're asking for generous contributions from viewers like you, and you'll get this fabulous John Denver box set. It's no different from that than QVC, which is more you are purchasing product and you are sharing with your viewers how this product can change their lives. So, it was a totally different beast when I got picked up by a couple different companies that wanted me to represent their products. My first one being Westinghouse Solar Lighting, which I had a great relationship with them when I first started with QVC. I mean, I got thrown to the wolves there. It's a different beast than any other media broadcast outlet. But the interesting thing about that was that I was living in New York City in a third story walk up brownstone. I had a back porch, but my back porch suddenly looked like Times Square because I was testing out all these solar lights. So I didn't have a yard to have solar lighting, but I sure had a lot of friends and family that benefited from me using their yards, So, and then I moved into health and wellness there. So being in that division where I feel most comfortable, I'm able to share different products where it helps people live healthy. And because that's where I am in my life, is the holistic living, holistically speaking.
It's just so remarkable to see all the things you've done. I mean, you even on what's it called? The daily burn something where you're doing exercises on.
What's interesting about that, Doug, is that kind of propelled me into moving into the space of coaching and practitioner work. I had been doing television for years, as you know, and always something in the back of my head said, there's always that question that you get, if you could be anything else other than what you're doing, what would it be? You have those two careers. Mm-hmm. And I always would say, I would have been a lawyer or I would have been a therapist. And those two things were so close to me because I love to debate, as my father, who was an attorney, used to say. And I love justice for people. So I knew the lawyer part and just the acting of being in front of people in trial, because my background's acting as well. Had a pretty good career as a professional actor as well. I knew that was part of me, but then I always held space for people people always feel comfortable talking to me, and I've always held space for people to share their upsets and how can I support you? This was just kind of innate, and people would be like, gosh, you should totally be a therapist. And I'm like, well, that means going back to school and stuff. And I've already had my master's and I did the school thing, but I did look into it. And what Daily Burn did was it opened the door for me to really think hard about how can I support people on their wellness and health journeys.
For people that know, just describe what Daily Burn is.
So what Daily Burn is it's a live streaming fitness show. And I was cast on the show back in 2015. So basically it's almost like one of your morning shows, like a Today Show or any of those shows that you see that there's a host. And what happens is that the host will introduce the show. We work out for a half hour. It's a half hour total body workout, but then there's an element of a live chat. There is a community. There's a support group. We have guests that come on that are in the health and wellness field. And from doing that and being very active in the community and people coming to get to know me, see me every day on set as a member of the classroom studio. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a trainer, and also filled in as a host. People really came to know me and asking questions, and I just felt like I wanted to support them on their journey. I battled weight and issues as a kid. I even went to Weight Watchers camp that we called Fat Camp. We called it Fat Camp. In fact, it was a TV show for a while called Fat Camp. That was my camp, by the way, in Lackawaxen, Pennsylvania. Wow. Yes. It was called Camp Colang, and we called it Lack of Action because there was nothing going on there, except, fun activities at a camp that just kind of monitored your weight and your wellness. So knowing that from Daily Burn, it kind of propelled me into how can I make this more for me? And I wound up getting certified at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is the biggest health coaching institute and school in the world, which coincidentally, they had hired me 2 years prior to be one of their online educators. So when I wound up going to the online school to get certified at IAN, some of the modules I was watching myself because I'm one of their online educators still. And I knew even when I did that, I walked into that space when I was recording a number of the modules. I'm like, I'm going to come back here somehow. How am I going to come back to IAN? And it just kind of naturally happened. And I wound up getting certified. And from Daily Burn, getting certified on IAN, I found Havening as well. And again, these things just kept falling in my lap so organically. It was just so beautifully
I certainly
happening.
do hope you passed those modules that you were the teacher for.
Right? I'm like, wait a minute. Do I still have the scripts on these? Is that considered cheating? I did have the scripts, but it didn't make a difference. It was,
you'd have to ask your lawyer about that.
Yeah, right. So So then I moved into the havening realm because Daily Burn, which I'm still on, by the way, I'm still on the live streaming show.
Are they still doing it right now?
They are. We're doing it a little differently. I mean, I've gone into the city maybe once or twice to record a couple episodes with them, but it's so compliant. I mean, there's only 3 of us on set. There's the host, the trainer, and then one class member, which would be me or somebody else from our group. And everyone's in masks, and you are more than 6 feet apart on the set, and then you leave. Like, it's no hanging around, chumming around with your friends from Daily Burn. It is in and out and very well structured. So I shot a number of episodes a couple months ago, and now they're running on rotation because they're taking a break there. But it's all new content every day. It's new workouts every day, and it's a family. It's my tribe. So it allowed me to move into the world of seeing that we are a community and we can really help each other in health and healing by being supportive. And that's kind of what brought me to being a coach and then a practitioner of havening.
That's really interesting. Just as an aside, real quickly, I just want to say this: the idea of being a lawyer because you like justice is curious. My dad was a lawyer also. And many years ago, I had a girlfriend, like back in the 80s, whose father was a professor of criminal justice. And I thought it'd be a kind of a good way to get rapport with this guy. You know, I said, "Oh, my father's a lawyer." And the guy looks at me like with this stern look on his face and goes, "There is absolutely no correlation between justice and being a lawyer."
Sounds so like Orson Welles movie-ish.
Like,
I can just see him standing there looking over you in like black and white film noir saying that. My dad was a criminal defense attorney.
Oh, cool.
And my father was also an assistant DA in New York City under the infamous Frank Hogan. So I was always around the law and I loved it. And I loved looking in his old files and like hearing the stories because he was a seeker of justice. My father was very fair. He was actually asked to take a seat in one of the as appointed judge. And he turned it down actually when I was young because he wanted me to have, I think we would have had to move to the city. And I don't think my mom and dad wanted me to live in New York City. They wanted me to have more of a suburban life. So he didn't take that seat and chose to just help people in criminal defense, being an attorney. But he also talked me out of going to law school, believe it or not.
Really?
Because when I got my master's, I wanted to go it was before my master's. I'm sorry. So when I was working, when I was an intern in Dallas at KXAS, Channel 5 News, my senior year of college, that's when O.J. Simpson happened. And I was that kid in the back room before there was like internet and Twitter and all this stuff that makes life sometimes crazy. I was in the back taking notes on every voicemail message that came on the call line for OJ. And Jerry Spence, who was like a famous lawyer, like with his fringe jacket and his long hair, he would come into our studio all the time. And I was fascinated by him. He was such a nice guy too. And it fascinated me along with my dad and then seeing that. And I'm like, I want to do something. I want to change the world. And I probably would have been the poorest lawyer in the world too, because I probably would have wanted to be like an ACLU lawyer. But my dad told me, because I was watching the case on TV and, Marcia Clark and Johnny Cochran and all them, I was fascinated. And he's like, unless you want to practice law and you're serious about this, like it's not like all what you see on TV. Because my whole thought was, I want to be a legal analyst. I want to be on TV and be the person they always call and talk to. And, he's like, you got to do the grind before you get to that part,
Yeah.
But, and look, it was probably the smartest choice I made because at the time after college, I was living in Louisiana because it was where my first TV job was. And I was like, do I want to continue and go to law school? And there weren't really any law schools around where I was. So I wound up just going to get a master's and focusing on business law and industrial organizational psychology, which fascinated me as well, like the behavioral side of things in the workplace. So I'm not disappointed that didn't happen because, the thing is, Doug, I have so many friends and family that went to law school and aren't practicing. Like
Right.
they just got their GED. And then I have some really successful, like two of my closest girlfriends are lawyers and they are killing it out there, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of
And
work.
it's
Most
a
lawyers I
lot of
know
work.
they spend most of their time like in a dark room by themselves reading stuff.
Paperwork. Lots of paperwork.
A lot of paperwork.
Yeah, it's not all being
let me
trial.
ask you about coaching.
Yeah.
So
what I actually do. Not the pipe dream.
Certified holistic health coach.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do you apply that? What do you do with people?
So with the integrative nutrition health coaching that I do, and what I do is I support people. I empower those purpose-driven minds that might be struggling in a certain area of their lives. Maybe they found out from the doctor that they have high blood pressure or they're diabetic. And the thing about medicine, as I've learned from working very closely with a number of doctors, especially those in integrative health and functional medicine rather, is that there is no nutrition that is taught in medical school. They don't teach nutrition classes. So doctors aren't really taught about nutrition. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian. But what I do is I guide people once they have a change. So if somebody comes to me and says, I just found out I'm diabetic, I have to cut out, I have to bring my carbs down to this level. I saw a dietitian and a nutritionist who gave me what I need to do, but I need support. That's where I come in. I'm like, cool, let's do this. But it's not even about putting them on a plan. I don't even like to really do that. What it is about what's really blocking you in your life. Like, why are you overeating, or why are you suffering from dealing with, I use food as comfort. Why do you use food as comfort? What's blocking you? Does that go back to something in childhood? Is it a control thing? I totally get it. My dad was sick my entire life, Doug, with diabetes. And I knew my control was the only thing I could control, since I couldn't control his health, was my own. And my vice was always to sneak the food I never had in the house. So, which led to the fat camp, but I know that it's not really about the food or the changes. It's about something deeper, which is where the beauty of the havening comes into play as well. But also letting people know that they're not alone in the battle. Your upsets are valid. What you're sharing with me, I imagine it's difficult to change the way that you're living your life, and suddenly you're told you need to make another change and you don't even know how to start. I'm here to empower you, to let you know it's possible, it can happen, and you're not doing it alone. And we might even share some similarities about what you're struggling with that I can share with you, knowing either I went through it or I have a client that went through it. It might not be the same story, but you have the ability to change the narrative, You
just touched on something I really want to ask you about. So there's two things that are which one do I ask about? So I'm going to ask both, and then you can decide how to answer. You've talked about the havening techniques a couple of times. Obviously, I know what that is, and I'm not sure that all of our listeners do. So describe what that is. I know I could do that as well. It's a psychosensory therapy that involves touch, either self-applied or applied by the practitioner. Of course, these days, it's mostly self-applied by the person doing the process. I'm going to let you talk more about that and how you apply that to what you do. And also, I want to know about this changing the narrative thing. I noticed on your website that you help people transform traumas into triumph through holistic living and storytelling. So I'm very interested in storytelling. It's part of my life, really. So I wonder how you use those things.
Yeah, it's part of everyone's life. I mean, we all have a story. Every story on this planet is valid. And I think what's really beautiful is that we have the ability to share that. And if something about our story is blocking us from living powerfully, we have the ability to change the narrative. I'm a storyteller. I've been a journalist since forever, probably, because I was, if it wasn't as a professional, even when I was younger, I was in theater. That's a story, writer, poet, all the things that I do are part of the story I tell. And where I like to integrate those two things together is that I'm holding space for my clients to share their stories. And if something in their story is not sitting well and it's blocking them, what is it that's causing that block so that we can empower you to change the narrative? Is it because something happened to you when you were a child? Is it a trauma that happened to you later in life? Look, part of the reason I went into this field is because I dealt with 3 rather large traumas in my life that I never really dealt with. And it wasn't until I faced them and first I was aware of them, and then I'm allowing for the ability to know that I can change, and then I'm aligning with the change. So those are my triple A's, the awareness, the allowance, and the alignment. And from that, you have to be aware of it first, and you have to be open, because I think, as a coach and practitioner, a lot of times you might get people that come to you and be like, hey, my boyfriend is having a problem. I really want them to talk to you. And it's like, that boyfriend needs to be the one that is open to this and allowing that. You can't force therapeutic means on anyone else. Don't do that. Like, let that person know that it exists and nurture them to be able to know that there are ways, but when, it's the push-pull theory, that which you persist resists, right? Mm-hmm. So be open to it, and once somebody's in an allowance with it, and they will become more aligned, but they have to be aware first. So, the storytelling is you realizing you are aware that you have a powerful story, that you have the ability to change the narrative. And that doesn't mean ignoring everything that happened in your past. That means you don't have to live with it, because I'm sure your listeners out there are people that think, oh, well, I had a bad upbringing, so it's just like, this is just a part of who I am. This is what I have to live with. Or, oh, I was heavy my whole life. I mean, I'm just a fat kid. That's that's my life. These are the stories you're telling yourself. But what's blocking you? There's something blocking you that can allow you to change that narrative. And by holistically taking different approaches and finding balance, because holistic means wholeness, the whole body, we can get to the source and find out what that is, the root of the problem, and give you the tools, because nobody heals anyone else. They call us healers, right? But in my mind, we don't heal anyone. We give people the tools to heal themselves. Right. You have that ability to change the narrative once you understand the source, so. Yeah.
And how does havening, tell us a little bit about what havening is, just for people that don't know, in case there's anyone out there who doesn't know. And how do you integrate that into your career?
It's definitely an approach that I am so closely connected to, and I'm so happy it came into my life, and by accident too, which is a whole nother story if we have time. But I use havening pretty much in every session, and I thought my work as a health coach would just be integrative nutrition. I'm going to focus on people that have health issues with eating and overeating. No, I find that the havening is my main focus, because I use it every day. I don't just use it with my clients. I use it every day. And what it is, like you had mentioned, it's a psychosensory approach that uses the havening touch, which is, 3 different areas of the body that you can use it on: your arms, like you're giving yourself a hug, your hands, like you're washing your hands, which we're doing plenty of right now. And if you're comfortable, areas of your face, since there's so many nerves in your face, that's actually my favorite place. That's like giving yourself a lovely facial. And those 3 touches, which you can use all or 1 or 2 of them, there's no one that is you don't follow a protocol with that. That, along with pleasant distractions, which could be, thinking of a lovely place that you like to go, a vacation spot, or just, a room that makes you feel at ease, something that brings you joy, a song or humming a tune, anything like that is a pleasant distraction. So with the pleasant distraction, along with the havening touch, you are putting your brain in what they call a delta wave state, which is, as you know, is very slow moving brain waves in the brain. It releases those happy chemicals, I love to call them, which is the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the dopamine. And in that place, in that rapid response, you are basically hugging and nurturing what we love to call in the havening community, Amy, who is your amygdala. Amy loves to go to fight or flight mode. And you're saying to Amy, hey girl, it's okay. It's good. You're good. You're safe. You're all right. You're haven. You're in your haven. And that's where the beauty of things happen. When people ask me how that works though, Doug, like when people say, I don't get it, how does that even work? Without getting all into the neuroscience of it, I think the best way to explain it is this. If you get into a car accident, right? And every time you pass that location, your heart starts pumping, your hands start getting clammy. You're just like, get me through this intersection, please. But you have no other alternative but to always go through this intersection. If you think of it almost like a jack in the box, every time you use that jack in the box and it's like, right? The same spot every time that jack comes out, pop goes the weasel. It's the same. We know it happens, but we still jump, right? So what havening is is almost like the wire cutters that releases the tension wire in that jack popping out of the box. And it kind of it still comes out. It's still present. These things still happen, but it doesn't scare the crap out of you, So that's a really good way of explaining havening, is almost like it's the cutters in a way that allows the box to still open. The accident still happened, but you're not living through the trauma and the upset and the trigger of that thing popping out at you every time. Rather, it's kind of like, all right, this happened. Does it mean it's going to happen again? No, I'm a safe driver. I am around people that drive safely. I create a safe space. I'm in a very safe car, my vehicle. I control this narrative. I changed the narrative right there.
Right.
And
yeah.
that's what
that is the amazing thing about doing havening with people or doing it for yourself, is that a lot of times that narrative, as you say, kind of spontaneously changes. It's like it changes itself. I remember the first time I ever saw a demonstration of havening. The woman that was being havened had survived the attacks in 9/11. And when the havener, I think it was Dr. Rudin, although I think actually it might have been Paul McKenna.
I was going to say, it might have been you.
No, it wasn't me. It was, I was just
okay.
The first time I saw a demonstration being done. I think it was Paul McKenna.
Love Paul. Yeah, he's great.
As soon as he asked her, like, what happened on 9/11, it was like you said, it was the jack of the box popped out and she was like full blown back in the building. I mean, she was there. She was back in the building again. It was as big as a trauma as I've ever witnessed, a person go through. And she was describing it as if she was there. She's in the first person said, I'm standing at the ATM and I'm, and afterwards, after the havening session, which honestly was not long, like a 20-minute session with Paul, she was calm as anything and looked like a different person. She was just like, settled back in her chair, calm as anything. And when he asked her, so what happened on 9/11? By the way, the trauma on a scale of 0 to 10 had gone from a 10 down to a 0.
Holy moly.
Like amazing. But then when he asked her, so what happened on 9/11? She said, well, I remember that I was standing at an ATM, and now she's talking in the past tense. I was at the ATM, and she's pointing, she's indicating like over to her right side, like over there, as if it was, I'm no longer in the building. I'm looking at a TV screen of this image over there. It's like you said, the jack in the box, still can come out. I still see this thing happen, but not affected by it at all. And so it's a remarkable thing. So it does sort of spontaneously change the narrative, right? That's her narrative.
Definitely
has changed.
And I can say the reason why I am a practitioner today is because my first havening experience was with Dr. Ron Rudin. When I came to that workshop that weekend and said, let's see what this is about. And, I was asked if I wanted to do it, or I volunteered to do a demo. My havening session on that stage in front of people that I didn't know from Adam was about the death of my father, who died 18 years ago. And, at this time it was a couple of years prior to this, but I had never really been able to get over that upset, constantly putting myself where I feel it in my chest every time I would talk about my dad. My dad died of a massive heart attack on the streets of New York, right near Schubert Alley. And I always kind of felt like the mortality of my father would come at some point because he was a severe diabetic, and I dealt with my father's illness my whole life, spent so much time in hospital waiting rooms for my dad with whatever he was going through. So the trauma of, it wasn't just the death, it was my father's life too. And I don't even know how long I was up there. I got to be honest, to this day, I have to ask other people because it felt like, and you're not in a trance. It's just like you're in the moment. But when Dr. Ron did that with me, afterwards, I was kind of like, wait, okay. And and I have to say for like 3 days, maybe even longer, I tried to create upset. I tried to create myself in a moment where I was like thinking about my father, where I would force myself to cry, and I couldn't. Not that I don't feel the emotions, but I look at it differently now. Like, I'm like, my dad and I lived a really beautiful life together. I had him for 29 years. He was such a great dad. And I was angry at him about things like not taking care of his health. So it took me further, not just the death of, but what was it that was what was the story I was telling myself about my dad's passing and my dad's life and my dad's relationship with me. And the havening allowed me to see, and doing more havening after on my own, that I could change the narrative about that loss. My father was still my father. Right. And I have beautiful stories to tell. So sometimes I get a little teary-eyed, but it's more like tears of joy. Mm-hmm. And and that first instance was like, sign me up. How can I help others in their healing? And how can I help myself more? Because it is a practice that we can do in ourselves for those little upsets. Mm-hmm. But when the big upsets arise, that's when you can have the guidance of a practitioner, which I still do to this day, you know? So it's powerful stuff.
It's powerful stuff. And one of the great things about havening, of course, is that it can, as they like to say, bolt on to whatever kind of practitioner you are, you know, whether you're an NLP person or a traditional therapist or LCSW or a hypnotist or health coach, whatever you might be, you can add havening into that, and it enhances it. It makes it better. You don't have to just be a havening practitioner. So
you have to find where it works. Like sometimes I'll use certain methods other than havening or with havening, you know?
Of course. So when people come to you, do people come to you for health specifically? Is it because you are a certified health coach? Is that what they're coming to you for the most part?
I got to be honest, people mainly come to me for havening.
Oh, do they?
They do. Yeah. But within the havening, they tell me, you know, I always ask them, like, what are your 3 main health concerns? And they'll say, you know, weight loss, resentment, I'm overwhelmed, test taking, whatever it is. Public speaking, that's a big one I get because I'm a broadcaster and I teach on the college level too. I use it with my students in college class. I teach it to them before they go do their on-camera work. Oh. So it can be used at any.
St. John's, is that right? St. John's University?
What's that? I teach at St. John's University in the city. So like before, if they feel nervous, I'm like, guys, this is energy. Like use it for your advantage, you know? Mm. So let's bring about that sense of calm and not feel nerves. Don't use the word nerves. But I do have people come to me interested in havening, or they're, you know, or just the fact that my main, which everything is emotional well-being. They come to me because they resonate with my message, which is the storytelling and the holistic living and turning your traumas into triumphs. It's the traumas to triumphs thing, you know, and they hear my podcast and they are like, wow, I just listened to this really powerful episode with you on Hilistically Speaking. I'm really interested in the kind of work you do. And maybe they don't know that I incorporate havening. And then I share it with them in my discovery call. And if they choose that they don't want to do that, that's fine. I don't need to use it, but it's a powerful tool to incorporate, you know, but they're definitely coming to me mainly because they have something that's blocking them from living powerfully. And I have the tactics and the tools to guide you and put the power in your own hands in order to do that. Retrain, restore, and just revive the way you want to live, you know?
Yeah. And what's really wonderful about what you do is also that you are, I think probably because you've come from this background of being a journalist and knowing the stories and how to, you know, tap into the way of telling a story that's going to be impactful on the evening news or whatever, that you're also really brilliant at branding and creating the holistic approach to healing that you call Hilistically Speaking on your podcast. I think that's just great. That's a great little branding. Holistic.
Yeah, we're working on that right now. It's amazing. I'm really excited. Look, I am so giddy when it comes to wordplay. I will, if someone says, does anyone want to play Scrabble? I'm like, pull it out. I also worked for Hasbro for 2 years. And while I was doing, still a journalist, still an actor, early years in New York. And I loved working with Hasbro because they always put me on the word games. So whenever I would do Toy Fair, or I got to go to Longmeadow, Massachusetts at Hasbro headquarters to learn whatever they were giving me to brand, be their representative to talk about it at the International Toy Fair. I was like, they were like, give Hilary Scrabble, give Hilary Scrabble Flash, give Hilary Word this, because I was just like, let's do it, So anything that's wordplay, I get really excited about. And when I see other people using wordplay, because it sticks. So for me, holistically, is really, really something that sticks with people and they identify with it. In fact, I rarely say the word holistic anymore. I think you're going to see in Webster's dictionary, like the word of the year, because I use it so much. Yeah. But
so tell us a little bit about your podcast, Hilistically Speaking.
Yeah. So basically the podcast is exactly what I'm doing with clients. It is empowering conversations with guests of varied expertise that are sharing their transformations from trauma to triumph through health, healing, and humor. That's it in a nutshell. So I'm really so excited to have unbelievable guests share the space with me and give me their time. And it's everything. I mean, I'm starting to get some pretty well-known folks coming on the show that just want to share their modalities or what they do. And I do a lot of research too. I think people just want to tell their story, whether they're famous or not. So the podcast is available on all podcast platforms. And it is really just empowering conversations. And it could be a therapist, it could be a yoga instructor, a meditation instructor. It could be someone that just went through trauma and has a story to share, because we all have stories. I can't emphasize that enough. And if it can just touch one person, then it's doing its job. If that person telling and sharing their story with me during the podcast, and we laugh, because you know what, Doug? Humor has to exist in healing. My name in Latin means cheerful and merry, Hilary.
Nice.
I live that. Because
my name in Scottish means from the Black Lagoon.
Okay. Let's not go down that road of a kind of podcast. They'll send people to my podcast. That's funny. The Black Lagoon. Okay. Is that what you did? Black Lagoon?
Douglas, yes.
Douglas, the Black Lagoon. Dun, dun, dun. Another film noir. But the whole idea is that we have to find the humor in the healing. Humor exists behind the healing. I'm not saying rarely when we're in it do we really feel it. Because look, I've been through a series of traumas. I was on air during 9/11 as a young news anchor.
Oh, wow, really?
Oh yeah. I remember that. It was traumatic. I was like in my 20s as a young news anchor, and I'm like, what's happening? And I wasn't even in New York at the time. I was away from my family. My entire family was home. I had no idea where anyone was.
Wow.
In fact, my dad was supposed to be in the North Tower that day doing a deposition, and his meeting got changed because the other attorney was sick. I mean, I would have lost my dad for sure.
Right.
I lost my dad a year later, but still, there's traumas that happen. I've been in a relationship that was not a very positive relationship, a toxic relationship. And from that trauma, I have learned how to approach narcissistic abuse and how can I help others that are dealing with that. So it's not just like physical health. I would say more, if not all, every client I have, there's an emotional element that I have to deal with, and that we're facing together. And sometimes that trickles down to why you're having problems with your eating, or why you feel that you're not healthy, or why you do this or why you do that. And you have that ability to change that narrative. Let's just get to the source first.
Yeah. No, I think that's really critical because, I've sometimes said in the classes that I teach, in NLP, the classes that I teach, it's like we all learn from our mistakes. But the question is, what do you learn from your mistakes? Like if I learn, oh, geez, other kids, they learn to walk, but I keep falling down. So I just, I'm not a walker. I'm just, I've learned the hard way that I'm not a walker. So I'm just going to sit.
Right.
We can learn the wrong things from mistakes. So you need to change the narrative. You need to have a powerful story that supports you and that says, because of that story, that I'm going to now be doing this. Not because of the story, I'm just going to quit, kind of thing. So it's really a wonderful approach. Let me ask you this. When it comes to coaching, this is the kind of traditional question I ask all the people on my podcast. Because this is called the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, what do you think is essential for a person to be like truly empowering to their clients, to be a successful coach, to be a good coach, to be a great coach? What skill or skills are essential for someone to do that?
You have to be an active listener.
What's that mean?
That means that you don't have your questions set up to answer that person back, but you are really sitting in the moment with that person and listening to what they're saying and letting it resonate with you. And this goes back to some of the work that I love that Sarah Payton does, who is an unbelievable nonviolent communication leader and expert. Adore her. But it's about resonance and empathy. It's sitting there and understanding. Maybe you haven't gone through what they've gone through, but if they are there and witnessing that you're truly listening to them, because there's a difference between hearing someone and listening. And then your response to them is in line with what they're sharing, because they're being vulnerable and very courageous in that moment to even share it, even if it's in a closed room with just you and that one person. There's still a courage and a vulnerability that you're witnessing, and you want to validate that, Yeah. So being witness to that and saying, I imagine what you're going through, or I imagine that experience must have felt really heavy, like something on your chest, or I wonder if you looked at it this way. Like, you're letting them know you really are listening. And that active listening is something I've used even before I was coaching. I might have even been coaching and not knowing I was coaching. Maybe I wasn't a certified coach, and I've been coaching my entire life, because to some of us, it's very natural. And it's sitting and witnessing someone and giving them the space to share and not feeling the need to always reply, which is something I teach my students all the time. Exactly. Shut up. I'm like, listen. I make them do like a 2-minute exercise where they have to just sit and listen to their partner and not respond, because you want to fill empty space. It's uncomfortable. Silence is uncomfortable. But when you sit in silence and when somebody's talking, they're going to feel a little uncomfortable, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to continue if you just don't say anything. So that's active.
Some of the great therapists are basically people that have repeated back to the person what they've just said.
Yeah. That, and also, I imagine that's hard, and not to make it about ourselves, because I think back in the day, and we've all been through some kind of therapy. I remember having therapists that would just sit there like, how does that feel? Or, a lot of times you're re-traumatizing when you make someone have to share the story over and over. It's cyclical. I'm like, great, here we go again. I get a week of going back to talk about the same damn thing. I mean, it's up to us to do the work too, as the client or the patient, if you're licensed. But it's up to the practitioner or the therapist, whoever's on the other side, to engage in some manner. I mean, I don't think it's just sitting back and the person's lying on the chaise lounge anymore, and the therapist is halfway across the room with a paper and like, I see. And you're feeling really uncomfortable. Like, what are they writing down? There is more about us being human and sharing a little bit of who we are, so that client feels connection. Connection is another thing that's very important. Connection and trust. With boundaries.
So, okay. So those are 4 things: connection, trust, and boundaries. No, it's great. No. No, don't apologize. We want all we can get from you.
Yeah.
So active listening, boundaries, trust, and connection.
Active listening, trust, and connection. And then within that, as a practitioner, it's our responsibility to have boundaries. Yeah, because...
So can you describe briefly what that means?
Sure. I mean, and I think we need to do this in our everyday life. And this is something I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a doctor about creating boundaries. I consider myself an empath. I take in a lot of what other people feel. And a lot of times we just want to help, and we'll do anything to help that person. But if we don't set some kind of a boundary, meaning that we need to not share our entire story, because this is really about that person's time, and it's holding space for them, and how can I support you? But what I mean by boundaries is, it's okay if Doug, you came to me and you said, I'm suffering from this relationship with my, dad or mom or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I had some similar upsets as well. And I can understand that must feel very heavy. I imagine that you're frustrated, or, well, not to project, but I imagine there are some feelings where I know for me was frustration, so that they're like, oh, she gets it, rather than, do I just look like I'm crazy sharing my stuff with this woman? So that's what I mean about being open and connecting. Boundaries is not sharing your whole story and your whole life with the person, or when you are not in session, you can't just be in a complete open book for them to be able to always have access to you, because we need to take care of our own mind. The one thing I always say is, be kind to your mind. Well, that I have to live it, not just share it. I need self-care. I need to step away from work. I can't be on a 24-hour. I mean, if there's something serious, I'm like, we're going to get you help. Yeah. But you need to know when to step back and say, this is our time. This is when we're going to share it. If you need, yes, you know how to reach out to me, but we also need to take care of ourselves in order to be the most powerful and energetic and mindful practitioner and coach for our clients, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say one thing I do now, especially that I started doing even with friends and family, especially, is when I have an upset of my own. And if I'm going to go to someone that knows me well, one of the first things I say to them is, do you have the capacity to I have something I really need to share. And when I call them, before I even start, I'll be like, are you emotionally available to hear this out right now? Because I might be capturing them in a day, and then they're like, oh my gosh, Hilary needs me. And I'm about to lay something on them, and they weren't prepared for that. They've got the school over here with the kids, and everyone's working from home, and they're picking this one up at tennis, and I'm making lunch. I don't have the time right now. So I've gotten used to saying whether my emotional bandwidth is available at the moment.
Yeah. Good.
You have to. You have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes me a better coach.
Yeah, for sure. I think a coach should have a coach. I think that's one of my sort of standard practices. That, you need to practice what you're preaching. You need to practice self-care and take care of yourself. And if coaching is so good, then you should have one too. Yeah,
you wouldn't go to a dentist that doesn't go to a dentist.
Right.
You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah. So last question for you is, if a person is struggling or wanting to be a coach and make a living as being a coach, what skills are essential for them to be able to be successful as a business person, as an entrepreneur coach?
This is such a great question. And I just had this conversation with my latest podcast guest, David Gandelman, who's meditation school founder. And what I thought we were going to be talking about was just meditation. And we went into this whole conversation about being in the healing arts and being in this field of coaching and mental health. And, there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes up in this line of work, where we're like, I've got my own struggles. Am I good enough to do this? How am I holding space for anyone else when I've got issues? Oh, please. We all have issues. Like, come on. We all have issues. We all have stuff. And that's what makes us beautiful, is that we all have stories. And I think the one thing you have to do is realize, what's your purpose? Like, what's your reason for wanting to do this kind of work? If you're putting the money first, maybe it's reevaluating, because you also want to understand, you want to have a better understanding of why you're making this choice to be a health coach, to be a practitioner. Are you doing it because you want to serve others and help others? And making that choice is really an important one for yourself first. Do you have the emotional bandwidth to realize you're going to be hearing a lot of personal stories? Some people might have difficulty with that, and it might be uncomfortable to swallow that, and that's the other thing. You don't want to swallow it. You've got to think about it as, I am here to serve this person. You have to be a good listener. And, the aspect that we talked about in this latest episode was that being a good business person too. A lot of times people that are doing service work, this kind of work, where we are entrepreneurs, we really are, unless we're working for like a hospital or a company that's, we are seeing more people going into entrepreneurial work now and have a better understanding of what that means. If you just want to help people, that's great. But if you want to make this a business, a thriving business, a successful business, it's not a bad idea to hire a business coach. It's not a bad idea to have an understanding, like, do you know what your financial situation will be if you're doing this? It's a good idea to do some research and get out there and have a better understanding of different kinds of modalities and approaches, because there are many, and you can actually incorporate a number of them into your practice. Like if you want to, hypnotherapy or NLP or havening or Reiki or whatever it is, be mindful of what you're gravitating to, ask the questions, because I think when you sit back and you ask the questions, the answers come when you sit in the silence. Just jumping and taking a certification program, which that's a tough topic right now because we're living in a virtual world. There are a lot of things out there where they're offering certification like in a weekend and suddenly you're certified in this, this, and this. It's like, do you want to be that type of practitioner or coach where you think you're mastering a skill in 2 days? It takes time, and you want to know that you have the time to invest into something like that, because don't forget, you're investing in something that's going to serve others in their health and well-being. So this isn't just about you. This is about somebody is putting their trust in you to help them on their journey.
Right. Yeah, it's really very important, to be able to understand that business is another hat you've got to wear. You've got to, you're the one that has to market yourself. You're the one that has to put yourself out there, and you got to be able to do that, and doing the research and asking those questions, absolutely important, and knowing, just because you get certified, the world is not going to be the path to your door and say, okay, I'm here to.
Yeah. Like even my mentors, I have a number of mentors within different modalities and approaches, and different people that have helped me. Like I have different business coaches that focus on different things with me.
Wow.
And some I'm very fortunate, are very close friends. So like we help each other out, I have a mastery in one area. They might have a mastery in another. I join a lot of groups. I am in mastermind groups. I'm in, with other entrepreneurs so that we can feed off each other and learn. And then, who knows, somebody might be like, oh wait, Hilary does that thing. I could use that. And I'm like, oh wait, Sally does that thing. I could totally use that. And I think it's just, there's power in numbers. There's power that comes from being in masterminds and groups. And
so
then
do a lot of that networking stuff.
I network like crazy. I've always been that person that networks and meets people and wants to have conversations. I'm constantly setting up, hey, let's have a 30-minute call. Let's talk. Like, what do you got? What you got?
Right.
To the smallest things where it comes to learning how to be more socially interactive on LinkedIn, because I found that to be a great avenue, or how to use social media to your advantage,
And I also noticed on your website, you offer a free.
I do. I offer free. I do. I offer a free discovery call, 30-minute session where, we can go over your most important health concerns, those that are concerning you. And that way, when you're walking into that 30-minute call, it's not me asking you those questions. I'm already aware, and we can go from there. And you're already saying that I'm willing to make this investment into my health by setting up that call. Right. And then that's where the dance happens.
Right.
That I
so
know.
That's another thing that people can emulate. They can model you and do that for themselves as well. They can, have a free discovery call for their coaching practices.
I've had people call me that want to learn more. And obviously, I'm not a trainer in the modality of havening. I'm not a trainer in integrative nutrition. So I would refer them to, if they're interested in classes, I would refer them to who they need to talk to. But if they want to learn more about how to empower themselves with their own health, or if they want to use that time to, pick my brain, it's your 30 minutes. I offer the discovery call, and then I have my regular 30-minute call. But this is a good time if that offering is there and you are feeling that you need support in some area of your life. And if you're ready to take that step to turn that trauma into triumph, to learn to restore and revive and retrain yourself and rewrite the narrative from the stories you're telling me, or you're telling yourself rather, book the call. Let me help you on that journey. And then we'll see if we align with each other, because sometimes people don't. Let's see if we align with each other and how I can support you going further on your healing journey. Because really, you can put the power in your own hands.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you.
Well, that does it for another episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed having you here. Hey, if you want more information about Sleight of Mouth, you can find it at essentialcoachingskills.com, or you might even check out sleihtofmouth.org. That's a nice website too. Thanks. Stay safe. Stay curious.